Welcome. In this short video I want to demonstrate an application called Dozer. Now Dozer is, or if you can see the strapline there, Morpheus processes with webhooks. So more specifically, what does Dozer do? It monitors running Morpheus processes and allows you to configure webhooks, which are calls, essentially calls to external applications, specifically or usually applications that are set up to support webhooks, so that we can provide information from about what Morpheus is doing to external applications. And to give an example, a webhook can be sent to any application. It's a HTTP request, but we're going to use Slack to receive the notifications from Morpheus. So the first thing we need to do is set this up. It's a Go application. The repository is on GitHub at /spoonboy-io/Dozer. We've got a README with some documentation on how to set this up and what it will currently do. But we're going to go to the releases page, and there's only the first release. Again, we're running our Morpheus software on Ubuntu, so we're going to grab the this distribution here, x86 64-bit. But what I would say is this doesn't have to run on the appliance itself. It could run on any virtual machine. It does use the MySQL database to track processes. It's not a push system. It's not using binlog or anything of that nature. It polls the database at an interval which by default is 5 seconds, but can be configured to be a different interval. So as long as you provide a Morpheus or MySQL user that can connect from the remote virtual machine, then you can use this from any virtual machine. It doesn't have to be on the appliance. But we're going to put it on the appliance. As you can see, I've got a temporary directory set up to demo this. At the moment, I don't think we have anything in there. We don't. So let's grab the link for that, and as always we're going to wget that to the server, and let's see what we've got. So that is our package, if you like, distribution, and we're going to have to unpack that. So it is tar -xvf, and there we go. So now we have 3 files. The green highlighted file is the executable, that is the Go binary. Obviously we've got the file that we've just unpacked from, and we've got the license, and we've got the README, which has all the helpful documentation in there as well. So this being a Go application, very straightforward to get this running. But before I run it, what I will say is that we haven't done all the configuration that's required as yet. So this will not do anything useful, but it should notify us of what any problems are, what we need to do next to get this working. So let's run that. And we have a fatal error. It's failed to read any database config. It can't find a file. So that takes us nicely to how we need to set this up. We need 2 files, the first of which is a mysql.m file that provides the user credentials for MySQL. And we also have a webhook.yaml file, and that is where we configure all the webhooks that we want to fire based on Morpheus events in a YAML syntax. And I have those set up already rather than create them on the fly. So if we just jump back one directory, you can see I've got the MySQL env and the webhook. So I'll copy them over, and then we'll inspect the files and just talk about how they are configured. So that's going to go to Dozer. Oops. Okay, so let's just make sure we have the files we expect. And we do. The MySQL file is there, and so is the Webhook file. So the first of the two, let's talk about MySQL env. Okay, now we have, as you'd expect, the server that we're going to access, the user and the password. The final option is the poll interval. As I said, it's a default of 5 seconds, but you can override that here, make it a shorter interval or longer interval, depending on what your needs are. The user here, you could use the root or Morpheus user from the Morpheus secrets file, and that would be fine, but that has rather more permissions than this application needs. This literally only needs to read from 2 tables. So I've created a separate MySQL user called Dozer. Obviously the password is there in plain text, but this has permissions literally to read from the Morpheus database and do nothing else. So that's what I'd recommend. The second file is the Webhook configuration, probably the more interesting of the two. And as I said, it's a YAML format file, so it's a YAML that you're going to be working with, love it or hate it. And just talking through the properties of that file, we've got the description that says what this task or what this webhook will fire on. We've got the endpoint of the webhook. In this case, we're going to use a Slack notification. We've created a bot or an app in Slack already. This request needs to be sent as a post request, and the request body is the data that Slack will output into the channel. And as you can see, it is a text field, and it has a single value, and that value has lots of odd-looking variables in there, and those variables are standard Go templating syntax. The application is written in Go, and at runtime, those variables will be interpolated, and data will be substituted into the message that gets sent to Slack. The next field is token. As you can see, the Slack endpoint has the token as part of the request. That won't always be the case. Sometimes you may be sending bearer tokens. So the token allows you to send that there. And the trigger piece, there are a number of triggers that we can talk about. I won't go into a lot of detail here. You can see the triggers that we can currently fire webhooks on are on status, process type, task name, account ID, and created by. We could go a lot further, and hopefully we will, dependent on feedback. But the process type we're using here is local workflow, and there are a range of process types that we could set this to execute on, but at the moment we're using local workflow. I'll talk a little bit more about those later. So that's it. That's the configuration for this webhook complete. So what we need to do is get the server running. So we're going to do that now. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the messages that we get here. You can see we've got a warning that says we've no state detected. Morpheus tracks state to ensure that it doesn't do the same thing repeatedly on each restart, and it tracks that in a file called Dozer state. We don't have that at the moment, so the first thing that Dozer will do is get the latest process ID to ensure that we don't fire on processes that have already completed or failed, which if nothing else would result in a lot of messages in Slack. So that's done. We found, if you can see those info logs, every time we poll, we're actually saying the last poll time, the last process ID we're tracking, and we're also tracking executing tasks. Dozer doesn't fire while a task is in executing state. It only fires when something has completed or failed. So again, in that Dozer state file, between restarts, we need to track what was discovered to be executing and monitor those so that we actually don't lose those. Otherwise, if we restarted and weren't tracking, we would lose those processes. We wouldn't capture them. So they are tracked as well. And at the moment, this all looks good. Dozer's running. We've got the banner that tells us what version we're on, what version of Go it was built with, and some other metadata. So the thing we need to do now to test this is fire a task that would trigger this webhook in Morpheus. Before I do that, just very quickly talk about what we did to set this up in Slack. I created a channel, and we've created a app that I've called Morpheus Bot, and Morpheus Bot literally it responds to webhooks, and what we hope to see is a message appear in here that tells us when the task has run, and it should also tell us basically the status of that task. Did it complete or did it fail? So let us try that now. Go to Morpheus. I'll just move this over slightly. And you can see here we've got a Node.js task, which isn't part of the core Morpheus implementation. This was built in a plugin, and I'll talk about that in further videos, I'm sure. But for now, all we need to do is let's have a look at what this task does. Not a great deal. Console log hello world, and we're going to run it, execute it, and we're going to check the execution, and that's the one, 4:55, 16:55. That's UK time. So that is completed, and we have the output that we would expect. So what we're hoping for now is if we visit Slack, that should have triggered the webhook, and we should now have a message in Slack, in our Slack channel, that tells us about that task. So let's check it out. And there it is, Morpheus Bot task Dozer demo. I don't know why I have Dozer demo. This is the Dozer application. That's me, but it's sufficient for our purposes. Created by admin. That's my user on Morpheus. Has completed with status complete. Happy days. And that's essentially it. That is the Dozer application. So by all means, please download it. Please test it out, and please feedback. I hope it's useful.